Avery Johnson is the perfect quarterback to beat Baylor.
Well, actually, I think it might be Sawyer Robertson that is the best quarterback to beat Kansas State.
You are Locked On College Crossover, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello there, fans. It's a Locked On College crossover between Locked On Baylor and Locked On Kansas State. I'm Stuart of ESPN Central Texas, Locked On Baylor, Christian Rauh of Locked On Kansas State as the Wildcats travel to Waco this weekend and hope to keep the positive vibes rolling after their first Big 12 win of the year. Of course, Baylor coming off their first Big 12 win of the year as well. Avery Johnson's a guy who can give Baylor all kinds of fits. Same thing on the other side from Sawyer Robertson. Two very different offenses, but that might be tailored exactly to what the weaknesses are on each other's defenses. We will talk about what this game means for the future of this season, whether a loss drops you out of any kind of Big 12 contention, and which coach is feeling more secure right about now. I don't think either's feeling that great, but no one's really quite on the precipice of getting fired yet. We'll talk about all that and more coming up on this Locked On College crossover. Christian, this game is a little bit different from the way we were previewing it in the summertime, isn't it?
Yeah, yes and no, right? At the same moment, because at first I did think this could have been the Big 12 game of the year. Maybe it turns into an instant classic, but that instant classic's going to be at 11 o'clock Central on ESPN+.
Yeah. Isn't that the classic time frame, though? The time slot, America's time slot for America's conference. ESPN Plus, 11 a.m. Central Time. Here's the thing that does kind of concern me, Christian, is we've heard this year, and we've seen it play out, right? Jackson Arnold, week one. We're thinking, he can't pass, man. Like, what's he even going to do here? Like, if you're tying an arm behind their back the whole game, Baylor's going to win. Didn't work. He scrambled and ran for 140 yards against them. 2 weeks ago, Sam Levitt, we heard in the build up to that game of, hey, this might be the best scrambler we faced all year. And I'm thinking, oh no. And Arizona State beats Baylor. Those are Baylor's two losses. I don't know if you've heard this or seen this for yourself, Christian, but I've been told that Avery Johnson can run a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, if you would have asked me that question a week and a half ago, I would say, well, I'm not quite sure, Cam. Maybe he forgot to do so because for the longest time, he wasn't doing that. The true question of if Avery Johnson is a dual threat quarterback was being questioned heading into that UCF game. They had probably the bye week probably happened at the best time for Chris Kleiman, for Matt Wells, for Avery Johnson. And then, of course, the return of Dylan Edwards doesn't hurt either. But Avery Johnson ran the football more than he ever did all season long last week against UCF and showed that he has that type of ability to be a dual threat quarterback we all hoped he would be. Not only did Avery Johnson run the football as a quarterback, they brought Blake Barnett, the backup quarterback, in to run some quarterback powers as well. It looks like they're trying to find an identity. They were searching this entire bye week for one. They brought it out in UCF where they're going to be a run-first team. Return of Dylan Edwards definitely helps. Avery Johnson running the football definitely helps. And I think that is something that could be a huge concern if you're the Baylor Bears.
And things are getting better from the, whole Matt Wells thing, the Avery Johnson aspect of this. Here's what Dave Aranda had to say about the quarterback that the Bears are facing this weekend.
He's improved with every game that he's played this year. They've improved, and it really speaks highly of Coach Kleiman just to see from where they started to where they are now. The tape, when you watch the games kind of in that order, they're a much improved team. And so, there's throws, just from playing them here coming up that you wish he wasn't making. You wish he didn't see the coverage tilt, and you wish he didn't idea it and throw it right where it needs to be. But he's doing that. So he's a better thrower than you want him to be. And so he's a challenge, be a challenge for us.
Sorry, I forgot to warn Kansas State fans. You got to have caffeine if we're going to do a Dave Aranda shot here. I've turned it up as much as I possibly can on the screen recording, and that's still the result. So they've had troubles with scrambling quarterbacks so far this year. Obviously, Avery Johnson with his athleticism very much fits the mold of that category. But are you agreeing with what Dave's saying there in terms of the passing getting better? That he's still, kind of becoming a more well-rounded quarterback, especially in the last couple of games.
Well, one, I do agree that you should probably put his press conferences next to a Teddy Pendergrass album, maybe some sexy saxophone. But other than that,
I did have to pause it to wake you up for us to get back into the show. I just want people to know that. Yeah,
I agree a little bit. I don't know if I fully agree after watching every single snap, but Avery has got a lot better. If you look at the box score, if you're just a box score warrior, you would not agree with that. You would think, well, his completion percentage is down. What's going on with that? Well, the Arizona game, I think I could agree with you. It was the worst game in a Kansas State uniform for Avery Johnson. I think that is where you're at. That's where Baylor fans, if you want to rewatch the Arizona game, that's what you want Avery Johnson to be if you are trying to look to win this one handily. But then if you rewatch the UCF game that just happened, Avery Johnson comes back and shows he can be, and I'm not going to say this is the case, but he can be that dark horse Heisman Trophy candidate caliber type player that we were talking about on Locked On Kansas State this offseason. I'm not putting him in the Heisman race. He had a terrible way to start the season, but that type of player is what I'm getting at. When you look at the completion percentage for Avery Johnson this year, a lot of it is kind of on his wide receivers. There's been a lot of drops this season for him. Heading into the UCF game, there's been 10 drops by his wide receivers. And then now you're talking about potentially losing Jace Brown for this game. Jared Bradley's out potentially as well. A lot of injuries on that wide receiver core. Avery Johnson's going to have to step up with some of these other guys. And then, of course, his impressive tight end unit. So do I agree with what Dave Aranda said? He makes good throws. Yes, but I'll be a little hesitant and step back and say, I need to see a little bit more from Avery Johnson, not just 1 week against a UCF team, which although they were overachieving, is still a team that we expected to be at the bottom of the Big 12 this year.
Yeah, tough to take positives from both teams last week. You know, Kansas State played UCF. Baylor playing Oklahoma State. In fact, most of my takeaways from the Oklahoma State game, they won by 18, were negative because Oklahoma State's such a bad team. But you talk about the accuracy numbers, and you know, again, it's better than it was last year for Avery Johnson. But we talked about that in the summer, like it needed to be better than it was last year. And he's everything across the board in the passing stats are pretty much on pace for what he put up for a full season last year, except for picks too. So that probably plays more to your point of, you know, some of it's just the talent he's got around him and, you know, drops and guys not getting open. Like it's not overly impressive in terms of, you know, the exciting plays and the big pop that he's making offensively, but he's not turning the ball over. That's got to feel good. It's got to feel like a good sign.
It feels good. If you don't look at the North Dakota game, which they let them stick around for way too long and just snuck out with a win, Avery Johnson has done a great job protecting the football. There's plenty of plays in that one where you're like, man, there should have been probably 3 or 4 interceptions in that one. But if you take that game away and you look at all the other Power 4 contenders they've played against, even the Army game, when you look at his performance in that one as well, he has done a great job at protecting the football, at not making terrible throws or throws that could be seen as a turnover-worthy play if you're going to be a PFF guy on that one. I really enjoy what we were seeing from Avery Johnson this season so far. And that one interception really does shine through for me. And if you're going back to what you're comparing to last year, and the completion percentage is always something we stare at, that interception ratio, that 8-to-1 interception ratio definitely deserves credit for Avery Johnson. Now, can he continue to do that while trying to not be that quote unquote perfect quarterback that he has tried to be at the beginning of the season, where he wouldn't run with the football? He would try to always look for that perfect pass and cause himself to maybe find him in 3 and outs and a lot of punting situations. Now that he's going back to being that running quarterback, that mobile, that dual threat type of guy, are we going to see him maybe make some more ill-advised throws? That'll be a big question moving forward.
Hopefully.
For you.
Yeah. One last, I need someone to throw this Baylor defense a bone, honestly. One last thing before we move on, talk some Sawyer Robertson. What were your takeaways from that UCF game? I mentioned, you know, the Baylor won Oklahoma State defense did not look good. And, you know, it was a 4-0 UCF team, but a very misleading 4-0 UCF team. So what were the big takeaways from winning by 2 scores at home in a conference game?
Yeah, first, I do want to say, I think Scott Frost eventually is going to get that team on the right path. It's cool that he's overachieving. I have I think they're going to be in the right path. I think they're going to move forward greatly, but it was a much needed win for Kansas State. Dare I say a desperation mode win for Kansas State after the way they started, and the coaching staff, I think, knew it. They brought the energy, and that was huge. And I know Baylor always finds himself in these situations where they're looking for teams that are trying to get resurged and recharged. Last week was a perfect example of the Oklahoma State game. It always falls in Baylor's favor. It's going to be no different for Kansas State heading into Waco this Saturday. This team feels completely brand new. If they play the same way they did against UCF when it comes to the energy, the return of Dylan Edwards, which has completely revamped the offense, Matt Wells can excel with Dylan Edwards. It was easily his best game as an offensive coordinator. We'll see if that can continue. The biggest takeaways I took from is the energy proved that this is a team that could be seen as a Big 12 contender. And that shaky 2-3 start, or 1-3 start, I should say, before they got this win against UCF, is in the rear view. And the biggest thing is they're 1-1 in Big 12 conference, something that is wide open to still get you to Arlington.
Yeah, peaking at the right time, or at least turning things around at the right time. We've talked about why Avery Johnson can be a pest for this Baylor defense. Let's flip the script. Let's tell you why Sawyer Robertson will probably be a pest for this Kansas State defense. Let's do it next on this Locked On crossover. Today's episode of the Locked On crossover from the Locked On Podcast Network is brought to you by FanDuel, a proud and official sponsor. You guys know NFL season's here. FanDuel has an offer you don't want to miss. Right now, new customers can bet just $5 and get $300 in bonus bets if you win. That's right. Pick a bet, put down $5, and if it hits, you'll unlock $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. For me, it makes watching football even more exciting when you got a little something riding on the action. Whether you're a casual fan or you love diving into the stats like Christian Rauh does, FanDuel makes the game day experience so much better. So what are you waiting for? Visit FanDuel.com to download the FanDuel app today and get started. Today's episode is also brought to you by Square. Your favorite neighborhood spot runs on Square. You guys know the certain businesses that make the neighborhood, okay? The places that become an extension of home, your third place, if you will. The sports bar that's dedicated to your favorite team's fan base. It's certainly the place for me. The spot with the best fries or wings, or maybe it's just that coffee shop that's been in your neighborhood for years. When neighborhood businesses thrive, the whole hood thrives, okay? For me, it's JP Ryan's. It's right up the street from me. It's a great sports bar. I watch the Red Sox there. It's a lively crowd. So much fun to get in there on a weeknight and just spend it with your people. Square is a proud partner of more than 4 million neighborhood businesses around the world. That was mine. I want to hear about yours. You can go to square.com/go/lockedoncollege to learn more. But before you do, go support your favorite neighborhood spot. You'll be happy you did. Square. See you in the neighborhood. Back to it on this Locked On College crossover. Christian Rauh, Locked On Kansas State. Cam Stewart, Locked On Baylor. You know, we had talked about it in the offseason, Christian, about how Avery Johnson could very well be one of those Heisman hopefuls this season. In fact, you guaranteed on the show, you said there will be a Big 12 quarterback as a finalist in New York City.
I did.
I hate to break this to you. He's probably on the other sideline this Saturday. Has Sawyer Robertson starred in Kansas State fans' nightmares this week?
I think so. I think they absolutely need to. If they're not, they need to be. Now, I'm with you 100%. We did the rankings for this offseason about Big 12 quarterbacks, putting Avery Johnson into consideration as a dark horse candidate. That's true.
We all had Brendan Sorsby number one. We all had Sorsby number
too.
one.
I mean, it's wild that we've talked about Big 12 quarterbacks this offseason, and some of the ones where we didn't even mention are being some of the top guys. It's really wild. But one that has rung true as Sawyer Robertson. He was seen as one of the most underrated players in college football, and I know I mentioned that on the show this offseason.
Yes, you've always been a believer, man. You've been a believer here.
He has proven to be it. What is he, third best in college football in passing right now? I mean, I know he's up there. He's one of them.
He might still be at the top. 1,700 yards, leads the nation in touchdown passes at 17, and is one of only like 3 quarterbacks to face 4 Power 4 teams already.
Insane. So, and you put that against a Kansas State secondary who lost Jacob Parrish last year, who lost Marquise Siegel last year, and is trying to find this identity. It's a big question. Now, if you want to be a numbers guy, as you mentioned that I am when you were reading that nice read for our friends at FanDuel, I will tell you this, that Kansas State is really good against the pass based on the opponents that they've faced. And that's where I want to go at. They've allowed 181 yards of passing per game, good enough for 37th in the country. Let's remind the folks who we played. We've played Iowa State in a monsoon. We've played a service academy of Army. We've played an FCS
Not much of a
school.
passer, Army.
Right. We played an FCS school in North Dakota that guy was making his first collegiate start at the FCS level. Actually played quite well, to be completely honest with you. And then Arizona and Noah Fafita, who had a strong passing start, but Kansas State did slow him down in that one, but allowed him to run more than he ever had in his entire collegiate career. And then, of course, UCF, who is not known for more of their passing. They're more known for their running attack. So,
and we're knocked down to their second quarterback, right?
And that's true for the majority of the game. He did return. Taven Jackson did return.
That's right. Taven Jackson, yeah.
However, 181 yards of passing per game, they've never faced the Sawyer Robertson. They've never faced this secondary truly hasn't been tested, although they are coming off their best game of the season this past week against UCF, including with that best week of the season. They allowed an 82-yard touchdown pass off their secondary. There's a lot of questions and concerns about this secondary. I feel a lot better going into this game this week than I did before the bye. I'll give you that. But I would not be shocked if Sawyer Robertson throws another 400 yards this week against Kansas State. Wouldn't shock me in the slightest.
And he's got 5 straight games of throwing 3 touchdown passes or more. Like, that's something that I almost have to say out loud every week at some point on the show, Christian, because it's like, that's such a gift, man. Like, that's such a gift to have a guy who just does that practically in his sleep, right? He throws for 3 touchdowns and usually no picks to go along with it. He does lead the nation in passing yards and touchdown passes so far this year. Big 12 Offensive Player of the Week the second time this past week, where he combined for 5 touchdowns against Oklahoma State. And I know this is going to sound super low-hanging fruit, like not much analytical thinking here, but you talk about how Kansas State hasn't faced a quarterback like Sawyer Robertson.
Yeah,
it's important to remember, too, this is obviously mostly because of Sawyer, but this is the best receiving room in the Big 12 as well. You've got like 4 touchdown passes last week to 4 different guys. And he's got 3 different receivers who he can go to on any down. He's got maybe the best tight end in the whole conference in Michael Trigg, and the mismatch, just the matchup nightmare that he is. It's simple math. You know, we see it at the pro level a lot. Like, sometimes there are just too many weapons. Like, there's just too much spread out and they can attack you in too many different ways. So I think we're both going off the assumption that Sawyer's going to have a big game this weekend. Linking it back to Avery Johnson, like, can that offense be explosive enough to keep up with a 35-31 kind of game, or do you need Sawyer to throw you a couple?
I think you got a little bit of both. I think you're going to have to think that Avery Johnson and Dylan Edwards can play back to back and continue go fire for fire, because I think that's where it's going to be. I think it's going to be a very high scoring event. I don't even know what the over under is right now. I think we were talking about it before the show. I think it's somewhere around 59.5. I think that's what we said.
Take the over.
High. If it was 71.5, I might even tell you to take the over.
Yeah.
It's insane. This is going to be a very high scoring event. I think both offenses are going to take off. What matters here, because Kansas State hasn't thrown a lot of turnovers. We mentioned that. Sawyer hasn't thrown any turnovers this year.
He's had 2, 3.
How many?
3.
2. Okay. Not many, right?
Yeah.
I think it comes down to who wins the turnover margin wins this football game. And as much as I've been excited about Kansas State secondary this past weekend, it's not Sawyer Robertson throwing the football. Gunnar Maldonado has been a huge step up coming over from Arizona. He's finally healthy. This was the first week we saw him without a knee brace, and he's been flying around in that secondary. He had an interception against UCF, should have had 2. Like, he was very good in that game. VJ Payne and Wesley Fair switched sides on the field, so VJ Payne could run around a lot more, Wesley Fair being more on the boundary. I think that'll help the secondary room in itself. The biggest question that I have is, what can Zayshawn Rich do in the secondary against Sawyer Robertson? He's been playing the most snaps for cornerbacks against Arizona. He played all 83 defensive snaps. That's right. Arizona put 83 offensive snaps on the table against Kansas State. He was only out for 5 snaps against UCF this past weekend. He allows receptions, but nothing usually big time. He's been a very consistent, a very reliable corner, but could he be exposed by a guy like Sawyer Robertson? Again, he hasn't played many good quarterbacks. Good's probably not the right word, but proven like Sawyer Robertson. Zayshawn Rich came out and showed off for his first appearance in the Rate Bowl game against Rutgers. Then he had that resume that I mentioned at the beginning of the season. Can Sawyer Robertson make him pay, especially with all those good wide receivers? It's going to be a wild game. And I think it's going to be super high scoring, and whatever defense holds up and maybe gets 1 or 2 punts out of this could be the complete game changer. Or maybe that middle 8 between the end of the first half
God,
and
we
the
love the
beginning of
middle
the
8.
that could be it too. This is going to be one of those wild games where they're going to regret they put it on ESPN Plus, Cam.
Our pal Pete Souza will reap the benefits of that, calling the game on ESPN
Yes,
Plus.
will.
It should be a ton of fun. And what makes this what adds an extra layer to this is we've talked about the quarterbacks, but these coaches, I don't think either one of them are one loss away from being fired, but there's starting to be some resistance, some pushback within the fan base. Let's talk about how that factors into the game. Let's do it next on this Locked On College crossover. But first, today's episode is brought to you by Mazda, another dear friend of ours at the Locked On Podcast Network, okay? They craft cars for those who do more than simply move, okay? They deliver confidence with every ride. More IIHS Top Safety Pick Plus awards than anyone else. You can feel the Japanese craftsmanship in every detail, from the metallic accents to available Napa leather upholstery. With all-wheel drive standard in every crossover SUV, you can drive with confidence through almost any season. Like our Bears or our Wildcats, Mazda sweats every detail, because when you make every move count, impossible becomes irrelevant. Mazda, move and be moved. Today's episode is also brought to you by Game Time, the one, the only place I go to get my tickets, whether it's for sports games or concerts, whatever it may be, especially for college football. We love it, right? The tailgates, the rivalries, the energy in the stands. There's nothing like being there. But let's be real. Actually getting tickets can feel like more of a battle than the game itself. Endless queues, hidden fees, prices jumping at checkout. That's why I use Game Time, the app that gives the advantage back to the fans. It's the easiest way to score last-minute tickets at the best prices with no surprise fees. What you see is what you pay. When I pull up Game Time, in just a couple of taps, I can find amazing deals. I'm talking about seeing the Baylor Bears for as low as $25 this weekend. So take the guesswork out of buying college football tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use the code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms do apply. Again, that's promo code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off. Swipe, tap, ticket, download the Game Time app today. Bringing it back. We've talked quarterbacks. The next place we can go for this matchup, of course, is head coach. Chris Kleiman, still one of the most respected coaches around the league, but maybe things haven't been going in the right direction the last year plus. And I know there was a little bit of off the field drama last year, some things that like nobody could really figure out what was going on. So take the temperature in the room, Christian. What is the feeling around this fan base when it comes to Chris Kleiman as it stands right now?
Yeah, it got a little sour at the beginning of the season, with the short start against Iowa State, of course. The unfortunate fighting of Avery Johnson's parents in Ireland didn't help either. Well, his father and I think son, with that whole fiasco, right? And then, of course, the upset loss to Army did not help. The fact that there was no coordinator change or things like that definitely asked the question of, should this be potentially the last year of the Chris Kleiman tenure? Should they maybe ask him to retire? Like, those narratives started. And I think, myself included, started to ask those questions, but I think we were a little bit ultimately too overreacting to the situation of where we were. We have to remember that this team won a Big 12 championship in 2022. This team always finds a way to win 9 wins under Chris Kleiman, with the exception of the COVID year. So I think you just got to the point where Kansas State just kind of had to remember and get back to the fact that we got it pretty good right now, being a Wildcats fan.
Yes.
But losing to Army does not help the situation by any means whatsoever. Getting back on board with the win against UCF, I think helped. A win against Baylor, I think, would completely get rid of that narrative, being completely honest with you. And even a remotely close game would be, I think, just fine as well. What would be a bad situation is if Baylor just completely runs the table against this Chris Kleiman team after having the week where energy was the huge thing, the reset they continue to talk about in the bye week, how this team has to buy in, and all those nice buzzwords that Chris Kleiman used. If that only lasted 1 week and then it went back to a blowout against Baylor, those narratives will come ringing right back, Cam.
Mm. It is so fascinating with this matchup that I think both fan bases have, some dreams of moving on and getting a new head coach, right? Both these coaches have won Big 12 championships in the last 5 years.
Insane.
It's just not something you see every day in college football, of a matchup of two recent conference championship coaches that both fan bases are like, yeah, I'll take something else. At this point, I'll browse the menu. For Dave Aranda, I've put the personal ultimatum out there, the official Locked On Baylor ultimatum of 9 wins. 9 wins. I expected 10 coming into the season. I think you have the talent to do that. You started 2-2. You could still get to 9-3. And if that's the case with this conference, baby, you could be playing in Arlington at 9-3. So it's definitely one. And look, we've had one 9-win season. So Kansas State fans, it's funny, Christian. I hear this a lot from parts of my fan base, and I totally get this, right? Of like, we need to remember who we are. Like Baylor, what was Baylor before between Grant Taff and Art Briles, and before Grant Taff? And it's like, dude, I get that, but like, we've seen that they're capable of so much more. Kansas State, you can say, remember what they were in the early 80s, late 70s. Like, yeah, they were the worst program in college football, but like, the standard changes. You've proven that you don't have to be that, and obviously Kansas State has done it overwhelmingly in the last 30 years, have proven that you don't have to be that. So it's kind of an interesting dichotomy there, and certainly a lot of implications, not just for coaches in this game, but really for Big 12 contention, I would say.
Yeah, I'm with you. I mean, 7-2 is what got you into the Big 12 championship last year. Now, of course, a couple tiebreakers were on that. Whoever loses this game picks up their second Big 12 loss of the season. So we're talking about, the beginning of October here. October 1st is what we're talking right now. And then, this game is going to be just a few days after that on the 4th. The first game of October for the Big 12 play for these teams. Could you potentially be over? Could Arlington hopes be over if you get a loss in this game in Waco?
Could be, man. Could be, because I'll say from the Baylor perspective, I don't know that they've played their toughest conference game yet. That's the thing. That's what pops up, especially in early October. Now, it could be like, we could look back at this in December and say, yeah, we had, because Arizona State went on an absolute heater.
Sure.
They're really impressive through 2 weeks of Big 12 football. So that could be the case. But after this game, you go on the road and play TCU, who despite that loss and blowing that big lead, I do think is still a legit contender in this league. You've still got to play Utah, which we're still kind of trying to figure them out, but I lean towards they're actually good. So for me, it could well be over because of that reasoning, because I don't know that you've played your toughest conference game yet. And to have your be 1-2 in the conference and heading onto the road to TCU would be a really not ideal scenario. Is that kind of how you're feeling from the Kansas State side of things? That this a second loss could be it?
You didn't even mention Texas Tech that we have to play this year. They're still on the roster, and we play Kansas in Lawrence. The streak is on the line in Lawrence. So I think this is I had this game as a loss. Technically, going into the offseason, I had them 10-2 with losses to Baylor and to Utah. That was actually my offseason prediction. Of course, the Iowa State loss doesn't help that at the beginning of the season. But now I think this is a must-win for Kansas State, because if they lose this game and you still have TCU, Kansas, Texas Tech, and Utah left on the schedule, you're not getting the 7-2. You're not getting to a tiebreaker potential to get to Arlington. And this season then switches to, well, can they make a bowl game? And that's not the standard.
The dreaded transition, man. It happens to most of us every year, right? Yep. Of like, guess we're not winning this conference.
Yeah.
Let's hope we can make a bowl game, though. Fingers crossed. So it's a very, very, very important game, kind of sneakily, because I don't think Baylor fans would have thought of it a couple weeks ago. I don't think Kansas State fans would have thought of it that way a couple weeks ago. We definitely thought about it before the season, but this becomes suddenly a pretty important game, and we're going to separate the men from the boys, the awkwardly feminine from the possibly Canadian in this one, which is going to be a big time stuff on the table. Christian, thanks so much for coming on. and crossing it over and giving both our fan bases some hope as we look towards this Saturday, but also giving them a little spitting in their coffee just a little bit when it
hit the over.
Yeah, hit that over. How about you make yourself some money? How about that? Go to FanDuel and hit the over for this game and tell them Christian sent you if the over does not hit. Anyway, thank you guys for making either one of us your first listen today and every day. And for those of you who don't, make it your second listen, because after you listen to one of us, then you know what I'm trying to say there? After you listen to one of us first, listen to the other one second.
Yeah, we'll call it the Too High podcast this week.
Yeah, that works perfect for Baylor. Never get out of it either. Just never stop the Too High podcast method. If I see more Too High, I'm going to be too high to even comprehend what's going on in this game. Anyway, thank you guys for making it your first listen today and every day. We will see you on the next one. This has been a crossover edition, Locked On Kansas State and Locked On Baylor.
I wonder if there's a place you can have it square for Too High.